Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm going to try something different today. I'm going to try using the present button. Where is that even? Maybe I won't. Shoot. Oh, here we go. Slideshow. Slideshow. That's what I want. We're going to try this. I don't know if I'm going to be very good at this because I think every time I click, it's going to go to a different slide. So bear with me. This is Ms. Carlson. We're going to do a close reading of Jack London's To Build a Fire, and I want you to follow along with this close reading. At this point, you should already have read the story on your own, and now we're just going to go through and do the analysis part. So the first time you read through a story or a poem or a piece of nonfiction, whatever it is, you're reading just to get an idea of everything, right? But analysis is a closer look. It's taking a magnifying glass to what you're reading metaphorically and getting a really closer look. Maybe you're doing some annotations, but you're really getting more in depth with what this story has to offer. And being that this is a classic, you can be assured that there are many, many gems in this story. And if you've not heard of Jack London before, perhaps if I say the title White Fang, which is a full novel, that's a really famous book of his. What I find is that students will come to me later, like in years, in the future, and they'll be like, do you remember when we read that one story about that guy in the wilderness and it was cold and there's that dog? I said, yeah, Jack London, To Build a Fire. And they're like, I have never been able to forget that particular story. And I was like, no, it's one that really stays with you. And I've read it numerous times and I still enjoy reading it each and every time. So, all right, here we go. I'm going to try clicking. Let's see what happens. This was assignment 3.3, where you read this slide that I gave you about the setting, and it just talks about the Yukon Territory. Hopefully you looked up where the Yukon Territory is. It's really kind of interesting to know where that is. There's a show called Ice Road Truckers that I absolutely love, and some of that is in the Yukon Territory. But it's just really important to know that the setting itself is a character in this story. The setting plays as big of a role as the man and the dog and anybody else that we encounter in the story. So just kind of keep that in mind because the setting is integral for the plot and it's also very symbolic. All right. All right. So we have been talking about willful ignorance. So I want you to be on the lookout for signs of willful ignorance, mainly by the main character, the main protagonist. I want you to find his willful ignorance or signs of it or examples and evidence of his willful ignorance. And in past assignments, you were given slides that showed the definition for willful, the definition for ignorance, the definition for the phrase willful ignorance, those two words put together. And, just keep revisiting if you need to what the definition is of willful ignorance, because it's something really important in this unit. And then I left myself a little reminder here that I'm going to be embedding a secret word or photo in the video just as to demonstrate for me that you watched this video all the way through. All right. So I want you to be on the lookout for these things. The way the man, and they only call him the man, we never get his name. So the way the man ignores experienced advice, I want you to be on the lookout for that. I want you to be on the lookout for the man's overconfidence. And I said irrationality. I'm not really sure if that's how I should have phrased that, but he is overconfident in rational thoughts and rational ideas. Be on the lookout for his failure to recognize warning signs. Be on the lookout for the way the man delays in adapting to his environment. And then as a juxtaposition, how the dog, the non-human, relies on instinct. So I'm going to be asking you for evidence of these things. And to collect your evidence, I'm going to give you a graphic organizer that's going to look like this. Although I did put some sentence starters like this in here for you because I want us writing incomplete sentences. One of the things I'm going to be assessing for this assignment is not just the meat of what you're giving me, but also the way you have grown in your writing over the course of this particular school year. You should be writing in fluid, complete sentences by now. We have done lots and lots of writing in terms of we wrote a lot of stuff in when we read the story Through the Tunnel. We've been writing in Nearpod lessons for our library unit, for the introduction to the unit at the beginning of end of January, beginning of February. I've been doing a lot of writing. So at this point, I want to see you are writing in full sentences. You are using proper capitalization, punctuation, things like that. Okay, so you can probably see that I took that list of things that I want you looking for and I've put it into this graphic organizer. So when you're going to answer the question, the man ignores experienced advice, notice how I took that and I made that the beginning of my sentence for my evidence. We can see that the man ignores experienced advice as evidenced by, and then we're going to find evidence in the story. All right, I've talked way too much about that. You know how to fill out a graphic organizer. You know what I'm looking for. So, discussion questions are going to come out of this later on. Don't worry about these for now, but just kind of keep in mind that I am going to be asking you questions down the road about what signs the man ignores that indicates he's in danger. Why do you think he chooses to dismiss these signs or these indications? How does the man's self-deception, so he's deceiving himself, how does that contribute to his downfall? Could he have survived if he had been more honest with himself? So it's a little bit of a spoiler there, but that's okay. Compare the man's mindset to the dog's instincts. What does this contrast reveal about the limits of human logic versus natural instinct? How does the setting, which is extreme cold, how does that function as a symbol for the reality the man refuses to accept? And how does To Build a Fire comment on human ignorance and the consequences of ignoring inconvenient truths? This unit is called Uncomfortable Truths, but uncomfortable also sometimes means inconvenient in this setting anyway. Can you think of real world examples of this theme, this ignoring of inconvenient truths? When things are inconvenient for us, if the truth is inconvenient for us, we tend, as human beings, we tend to ignore them. I suppose as a coping mechanism sometimes. But again, don't worry too much about this, but I just want to give you a heads up that I am going to be asking about this later on. Sheesh, we're already 8 minutes in and I haven't even started the story. But that's okay. We need a lot of front loading for the story, and you needed to know kind of what my expectations are. You're going to notice that I made notes here, and that's just part of my close reading and annotating. Hopefully when you read the story, you made annotations as well. To Build a Fire by Jack London. Day had dawned cold and gray when the man turned aside from the main Yukon Trail. He climbed the high earth bank where a little traveled trail led east through the pine forest. It was a high bank, and he paused to breathe at the top. He excused the act to himself by looking at his watch. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. There was no sun or promise of sun, although there was not a cloud in the sky. It was a clear day. However, there seemed to be an indescribable darkness over the face of things. That was because the sun was absent from the sky. This fact did not worry the man. He was not alarmed by the lack of sun. It had been days since he had seen the sun. The man looked along the way he had come. The Yukon lay a mile wide and hidden under 3 feet of ice. On top of this ice were as many feet of snow. It was all pure white. All right, so the thing I annotated here is that the man turns off the main trail. We see this in the very first sentence, and we know when we read that there are no accidents. When an author wants us to know something, they tell us something, whether that's outright or, sometimes it's metaphoric and things like that. But the very first sentence is always very important from a story, from a book, whatever it is we're reading. And it's no accident that Jack London wrote, "Day had dawned cold and gray when man turned aside from the main Yukon Trail." Already alarm bells are going off in my head as a reader. He takes a little traveled trail. Why? Why does he just feel that confident in himself that he doesn't take the main trail? It's very telling already about who this guy is in terms of his behaviors. And then in that kind of aqua or teal blue here, maybe this fact should worry the man. The fact, he says in here, this fact did not worry the man. The fact that the sun was absent. Should he be worried? The author's telling us that the man isn't worried. It's been days since he's seen the sun. It's okay. I don't know. To me, again, these alarm bells are going off. Oops, I'm going to go back if it lets me here. Sorry about that. All right, the last line of that first page, or page 64. North and south, as far as his eye could see, it was unbroken white. So everywhere he looks, white. So snow, right? The one thing that relieved the whiteness was a thin, dark line that curved from the pine-covered island to the south. It curved into the north, where it disappeared behind another pine-covered island. This dark line was the trail, the main trail. It led south 500 miles to the Chilkoot Pass and saltwater. It led north 75 miles to Dawson, and still farther on to the north 1,000 miles to Nulato, and finally to St. Michael on Bering Sea, 1,000 miles and half 1,000 more. 1,000 miles is a lot, y'all. But all this, the distant trail, no sun in the sky, the great cold, and the strangeness of it all, had no effect on the man. How? How does that have no effect on somebody? It would have an effect on me. I know that. It was not because he was long familiar with it. He was a newcomer in the land, and this was his first winter. He's a rookie. So he's not comfortable because he's familiar, because the author's telling us this is the first winter for this man. All right, let's continue. The trouble with him was that he was not able to imagine. Again, when an author says something like the trouble with him was, something we want to take notice of. There's trouble brewing. He, the man, was quick and ready in the things of life, but only in the things and not in their meanings. So he sees things rationally, he sees things on the surface. Again, another alarm bell. 50 degrees below zero meant 80 degrees of frost. Y'all, 50 degrees below zero. Not even fathomable. The coldest I think I have ever felt is maybe 24 below, maybe 30 below with a wind chill. This is air temperature 50 degrees below zero. Wow. Such facts told him that it was cold and uncomfortable. So just the facts. And that was all. It did not lead him to consider his weaknesses as a creature affected by temperature. It did not lead him to consider his weaknesses as a creature affected by temperature. Nor did he think about man's general weakness, able to live only within narrow limits of heat and cold. From there, it did not lead him to thoughts of heaven and the meaning of a man's life. So this man is not a deep thinker. He's not somebody who thinks deeply about the meaning of life. 50 degrees below zero meant a bite of frost that hurt, and that must be guarded against by the use of mittens, ear coverings, warm moccasins, and thick socks. 50 degrees below zero was to him nothing more than 50 degrees below zero. That it should be more important than that was a thought that never entered his head. As he turned to go, he forced some water from his mouth as an experiment, so he spit. There was a sudden noise that surprised him. He tried it again, and again in the air. Before they could fall to the snow, the drops of water became ice that broke with a noise. Imagine you spit into the air and it instantly freezes and cracks. He knew that at 50 below zero, water from the mouth made a noise when it hit the snow, but this had done that in the air. Undoubtedly, it was colder than 50 below, but exactly how much colder, he did not know. But the temperature did not matter. Oh, but yes, it does matter. He was headed for the old camp on Henderson Creek. Actually, I'm going to pause there. So I have a slide here. This other slide on the right here in white is just, I just took part of that page I just read and I just kind of blew it up because I want us to kind of tune into what this part is saying. And I took a couple of quotes from here as well. The one thing that relieved the whiteness, this is a quote that I'm reading here now. The one thing that relieved the whiteness was a thin, dark line that curved from the pine-covered island to the south. The dark line was the trail, the main trail. Wow. And then notice how I have in parentheses the author's last name, comma, and the page. So this is page 65. You can see that at the bottom. You put another bracket around it and the period goes on the outside. I'm going to be looking for that in some writing exercises at some point that you know how to properly cite. And then I also took the quote, but all this had no effect on the man. It was not because he was long familiar with it. He was a newcomer. Both extremely important points that we're probably going to come back to later. Maybe these are things that we're going to be putting in our graphic organizer. This is again just the same page again, but I circled or put a box around this part where it says, nor did he think about man's general weakness, able to live only within narrow limits of heat and cold. It's also a very striking sentence, and it's so true, and it's something we maybe don't think about very often, but we have limitations as human beings, right? We can't live outside of limitations that are scientific. Obviously we can stretch ourselves in many ways, mentally and physically, but there are certain things we just cannot physically do as human beings. And one of those is extreme heat and extreme cold. So also, and I mentioned this as I was reading, but you must take notice when an author includes a line that says, the trouble with him was, whoa, okay. The author is banging us over the head with, the trouble with this guy is, ... Also keep in mind man's general weakness and the meaning of a man's life, because those things are things that the man in the story tends to turn a blind eye to. And we're already at 19 minutes. I think I'm going to read this slide, and I think we're going to end here. I don't typically like to go over 15 minutes, but we're going to go a little bit longer than that for this video, just because I had so much intro. I did also circle, you can see here in red, this part that says 50 degrees below zero was to him nothing more than 50 degrees below zero. That it should be important, that it should be more important than that was a thought that never entered his head. I think that's important, especially that line that it should be more important than why can I not read that? that it should be more important than that was a thought that never entered his head. That's a lot of thans and that's. Woo! 1, 2, 3 that's in that sentence. So pay attention, as I've got here in the upper right-hand corner, please pay attention to how facts and knowledge work in tandem with, but also opposed to each other. And what I mean by that is facts and knowledge are great. It's great that human beings can work with facts and knowledge. But in this story, those sometimes work against the man in the story. So I just want you to keep in mind that. And then introduced here is the idea that the power and awe of nature should be more important than just mere facts. And this guy is only dealing in facts. He is underestimating Mother Nature. 50 degrees below zero should be important to him. And he should be thinking about it in more than just facts. He should be thinking about what that means. And especially in terms of our shortcomings as human beings, if you want to call it a shortcoming. But scientifically, we can only deal with so much heat and so much cold. And I don't know if this guy is humble enough to understand that. I just again kind of pulled something from what we read. This quote that says, undoubtedly, it was colder than 50 below. So I don't know if the temperature, or he looked at a thermometer, it doesn't really tell us. Maybe it doesn't register anything colder than 50 below. And then the author says, but exactly how much colder he did not know. But the temperature did not matter. And I put a warning sign, caution, uh-oh, it should matter. We know it should matter, right? All right, so I think we're going to stop there. The last line that I read was, but he was headed for the old camp on Henderson Creek. And I don't know if I actually did read that last line. But we're going to end there, and that's where we'll start up next time we meet. Thank you for listening and following along. And we will also talk about taking those quotes that I've talked about and maybe even some others and putting those into our graphic organizer. Until then, enjoy yourself. Have a great day. All right, y'all. I forgot to talk about the secret word or photo. The secret photo is here. And I tucked a little picture of a husky dog in the lower right corner, husky. And let's say that the secret word is going to be in all caps, H-U-S-K-Y, husky, H-U-S-K-Y, husky. All right, that's the secret word, secret photo and secret word. Thank you again.